in yesterday. Donald Trump Jr. is Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization, and it's great to have you here this morning.
Great to be here.
Welcome to you. You know, anybody who was expecting him to back down after the trip to Mexico in the morning and then that forceful speech last night, he came right out of the gate with, "We're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it," and you heard the response from that crowd.
Listen, he's been saying it all along, and you know, when he speaks to people and he asks people, "Hey, what are your guys' thoughts on that?" I mean, that's what he's done. That's what's been great about his campaign. He actually cares what the people of this country think. So he asked them, but he's never changed his position on that. I'm glad that last night finally solidified that. There's not going to be any ambiguity trying to fill a news cycle by saying, well, he asked a question, therefore he must be flip-flopping. There's never been a flip-flop.
It's fascinating. The New York Times wrote a story before he gave the speech and said that he was softening his stance on what he would do with the 11 million immigrants who are here. And I think, you know, he left some doors open in terms of how he would deal with that policy, did he not?
I don't know that he left any doors open. I mean, it's very clear that people have to go before they can ever come back in. You know, he's not anti-immigrant. You know, I'm the son of an immigrant. He's the son of an immigrant. But there has to be a process. I mean, I go around the country, and I've been fortunate to be able to travel the whole country with him as of late. And people come up to me that are immigrants, and they, you know, I went through the process, and I went through for, you know, 8 years, 9 years, 11 years, whatever it may be. And you know, they're proud that they went through that process. They're proud of this country. I mean, it's almost part of the assimilation that we've been talking about, that you know, people have to feel a vested interest in this country. And the people who went through it the right way, they really get that. They've really become Americans. And I think that's an important component of it.
Let's play a little bit of Tim Kaine, the vice presidential candidate for Hillary Clinton. And here was his response to the meeting with President Peña Nieto.
He's been talking for a year about we're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. And then he goes and he sits down and he goes eyeball to eyeball with the president of Mexico. And what, he forgets suddenly to bring it up, or he's too afraid to bring it up, or he chokes in the meeting. It's just kind of an indication that the guy talks out of both sides of his mouth.
What do you think?
Listen, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, that has no credence. I mean, anyone who knows anything about a deal or negotiation, you build a relationship first. You don't go with the hardest line aspect of a thing on day one. We've been very clear. We've never backed away from that. There's methodologies by which we can do it. I think Chris Kobach was on Fox earlier today. He helped us, you know, come up with a structure that you could do that through remittances, et cetera. I mean, there's actually a legal way you could make it happen. That would certainly make financial sense. Now, that may not be the way it happens, but you don't start a negotiation when you're building a relationship with someone. You build a relationship first. Now, if Hillary Clinton, if Tim Kaine had ever done a deal, or maybe a good deal, in their lives, if they'd ever done anything in business, if they'd ever experienced the real world instead of just being politicians talking in theory without any actual practice, maybe he'd know that. But because they don't, because they've never built anything, because they've never actually created a job, they sit there in sound bites, and Hillary Clinton will regurgitate sound bites that someone much wittier than her will write for her. You know, that's the way they've conducted their entire lives. My father's done these things. He's created those jobs. He's done it in the real world where real people's lives, their families' livelihoods and well-beings depend on him. Trust me, he knows how to set up a negotiation.
Well, I thought
he knows
it was
how to start a deal.
fascinating, you know, because he went down there and they shook hands, and they had what every pundit last night called a very presidential moment, standing in front of the two podiums there. And then it's sort of like, you know, walk softly and then carry a big stick. So the big stick came to Phoenix last night. Here's my plan. But he wove in this morning to the speech that he wanted to graciously thank the president of Mexico for their meeting yesterday. I mean, it's quite interesting.
It's relationship building. It's relationship building, and you have to do that. I mean, I think that's, you know, that's an important part of any negotiation. I think it's also interesting to see, you know, my father, who's definitely taken a controversial stance on that, actually has the guts to go. Has the guts to take the president up on his invitation to be able to go down to Mexico.
Do you think they were surprised?
Into what could be a pretty hostile area.
Do you think he was surprised that he took him up on it?
No, because my father's not afraid of anything. You know, he's going to go and do that. He's going to speak his mind as he has, and he's been speaking his mind for 18 months to the American people. He's brought up things that all other politicians would hide from because it's not politically correct. They rather stick their head in the sand and pretend these real issues aren't real issues. And my father's not that guy. He's going to do what's right for this country. He's going to do what's right for America. for our kids and our grandkids behind them, because that's the guy he is.
Tell us about that decision process, because it had to have been a discussion, and I want to know what was his stance on it when it was, you're in the room and they say, well, he's issued an invitation, and it might be a little tricky to go because this guy may make you look bad down there.
Listen, I think my father's one of those guys. He's going to take that chance. He's going to say, hey, look, I have to meet with him. This is one of our largest trading partners. It's our neighbor to the south. We eventually will have to do this when he's the president of the United States. We have to start forming that relationship. So, there is clearly a risk to it, but, my father's not averse to those kind of risks. So he's going to have to deal with them one way or the other. So, I thought he welcomed the opportunity to be able to do that. And of course, Hillary Clinton's, in hiding. She hasn't given a press conference in 280 days. She's been in the Hamptons. She does a fundraiser, doesn't have the energy to perhaps go down there and do it herself. It's a very different person. They're two very different people. You see my father on the campaign trail every day, speaking to the American people multiple times a day. In yesterday's case, in different countries, doing it all day long. Where's she? She's in hiding. She has to get her VP to come out and make even a basic response to something like this. It's pretty pathetic.
So we've seen this new leadership, Kellyanne Conway, campaign manager, Steve Bannon as the chairman of the campaign, and we have seen a different campaign over the past couple of weeks. I mean, I haven't once seen your father come out over those weeks and go after the press and hammer the press. It's not about him anymore when he's out there. He's definitely put the focus on policy and stringing together these events that are starting to show a difference in the polls. So what happened that produced that change?
Listen, I think it's a combination of, he gets it. He sees where we are. We know we have one opponent now. It was a lot different than then in the primaries. You're never going to get a fair shake in the media, so that's obviously something that's still frustrating because, Hillary Clinton can perpetrate fraud on the American people for decades, and that's okay. It's a little bit different. Trump, if there's a comma in the wrong spot, it's like the end of the world. It's gotten so ridiculous, so that can be frustrating. But, he gets it. We're up against one last person. Again, I've seen him do this time and time again in business over 40 years. He understands how to win. He understands how to fix things. He understands how to make them successful. That's what he's going to do for this country.
In the weeks after the convention, there were missteps. Was there a moment with him where you felt like he thought, I could lose this thing? I could lose this thing.
I think there's moments of frustration. This is a very cyclical process. You one moment everything's great, the next moment it's not. It's interesting, and we're not politicians. And perhaps that's the primary difference. We're not politicians. We haven't been doing this for decades. He's a real guy. He wants to speak with real people in this country, the people who've been forgotten in this country. He wants to give them a voice again. So, there is an element of, we're figuring out this as we go along. This is his first presidential run. It's his first, everything's been a first. But he really gets it now. He understands how the game is played. And I think he's playing it very well. And you can look at all the trends. I think they're going to reaffirm that.
So he's going to Detroit this weekend.
Yes.
What is that going to be like? What's he going to do there?
Well, listen, I think he's going to speak to the African-American community, and he's going to speak with them. I think he's been having conversations with people all over the world, not lecturing them, not speaking to them, but with them. And I think he's going to point out some of the basic facts. If you look at what liberal policies have done to the African-American community and to the Latin community, frankly, immigration being one of them, it's been, frankly, disastrous for them. And so I think he's going to talk about, people, hey, don't blindly vote Democrat because you think that's what you're supposed to do. Look at what those policies have done to your families, to your neighborhoods, and maybe reassess that a little bit. Imagine we implement what he wants to do. Bring jobs back to this country. Imagine everyone in those neighborhoods was employed. Imagine you ran a surplus and you could actually educate those kids well. What is that going to do for the future of your child? You give him a much better education. This isn't rocket science, Martha. This isn't rocket science.
I think it's very striking when you talk about this visit, right? He's going to go into a church in Detroit and apparently walk the streets with Ben Carson, where Ben Carson grew up. The moments that we've seen politicians do that are so few and far between that it's hard to conjure up an image of that in your mind. I wonder, though, as a campaign, do you wish that you had started this line of process 2 months ago, because you've got 68 days to go, and if he doesn't win, you're going to look back at this and say, gosh, we really should have started that whole system a lot earlier?
I don't know. I guess I understand the point. I'm not sure, because